Pressure. Am I audible? Audible. Yeah. Am I audible, sir?
Yes, cool.
Yeah, here we are going to go. Uh,
I'm not able to see that.
yeah. I think.
I'm not able to see the stage. I can see now the audience.
Hi, a very good evening everyone and welcome to a panel of discussion on a very good evening everyone and welcome to a panel of discussion on scaling universal sustainability. I'll get straight away into the star-studded lineup for today. Let's welcome our chief guest with a huge round of applause. First up, Mr. Anil Agrawal. He's a former police officer, an IPS officer who was active in commerce industry and startup initiatives. He served as the additional secretary in the Department for Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade.
Hello, sir.
Next up we have Mr. Swish Sethi. He is the managing director at Protean e-Governance Technologies. He is a seasoned financial services leader with over 3 decades of global experience driving transformation and innovation. Next up we have Mr. Amit Bhatia. He is the founder of Aspire Circle and Aspire Impact, a social enterprise in ESG, sustainability and impact measurement. He is a multiple award-winning social entrepreneur. And we have with us Dr. Vivek Raghavan, who is connected with us through a video call. He served as a chief product manager and biometric architect at the Unique Identification Authority of India. He is an entrepreneur, technologist, and creator of digital public goods. I hand over the night to our special guests.
Thank you so much, and a pleasure to be here. So, good afternoon, everyone. Vivek, you can hear us, right?
Yes, I can. Yes, I can.
Great. So let me start by just spelling out the topic that we are covering today. So we are talking about scaling universal sustainability. And I will first give a little bit of context to what sustainability is, and then come to the second part of our equation to say, how do we harness digital public infrastructure for a global impact? So we want to marry these two concepts and see where does it take us. When we talk about universal sustainability, we are taking a very, very broad scope over here. We are not just limiting it to sustainable ecosystems out there. We are talking about any sort of societal impact. This could be education CSR, it could be health, it could be anything in the space of climate. So this is a general look on sustainability. And the challenge which remains today that despite significant, sustainable efforts being out there, global efforts being out there, it's a very fragmented ecosystem. The challenge still lies in the fact that if you are an institution which is providing the funding, we talk about the providers and the seekers, how do they discover each other? How do I know where is my money going if I am a philanthropic institution? Is it going to the legitimate beneficiaries? So public trust, interestingly today, is somewhere in the range of 30-34% to assure where the money is going and it's going to the right beneficiaries or not. Which as a result makes it very difficult for people who are providing to trust the ecosystem to be able to give the funds. And likewise, if we have to do a need assessment, is the money going to the right people? Are the right people discoverable in the ecosystem? So it's all about connecting them. And what we want to do is we want to look at taking a DPI approach. Now when I talk about digital public infrastructure, it is about laying out the digital rails in the economy for discovery. And I won't delve much into it at this stage, but hear from the people who are in the space. But what I really want to leave a thought with you to put a context to DPI. Today we are all familiar with the payments DPI, right? UPI. Ultimately, on the foundational layers of digital public infrastructure like identity, which is Aadhaar for all of us, we've been able to create a payments ecosystem where you've got a central digital public infrastructure running and you are able to make your financial transactions happen seamlessly, real-time online, on two sides, through multiple banks. And this is more a protocol approach to connecting the funding side and the receiving side. Take the similar example of ONDC, which is the DPI for digital commerce, where you're connecting the buyers and the sellers. But we'll go into it later. I would like to now turn to the rest of the panel and see how we can get some points of view over here. So Amit, first of all, coming to you as a person who is a practitioner now in the impact space, what do you think are the key pain points when we talk about universal sustainability and efforts to connect this fragmented ecosystem? So it would be good to understand the sort of ecosystem out there, the actors within the ecosystem that need to be connected, and what is the challenge out there?
Thank you, Suresh. And for the benefit of the student, I'm going to do a 30,000 foot down dive to answer your question. The total professionally managed wealth in the world, total money, all bank accounts, all insurance, is about $150 trillion. In the last 25 years, about 60 trillion of that is already running to report, alongside financial returns, some ESG benefit, some sustainability benefit or social impact. So the professional capital is all trying to find a way that they can tell the stakeholders that they are responsible citizens of this world. The money that is there for social good is far smaller pool. OECD governments spend about 20% of their budget. India spends about 9% of its $3 trillion economy, about $280 trillion. Only 5% of it is non-government. So think of it, $14 billion is out there as philanthropy, retail donations, etc., available to do social good. Now, in India, this sector, Suresh, is very fragmented. We have almost 3 million NGOs, all trying to find a way to do good. We have large companies all trying to find a way to do good, but the infrastructure available for that is missing. And that's where DPI comes in. In the non-profit world, trying to find a way to get to this beneficiary to create that trust that the money meant for social good, whether for education or healthcare or disaster relief, or some environment or rural, got to the end, benefit. It would reach the end beneficiary. That is missing. So I think there is a very large opportunity for DPI to be used, as the platform on which so many different protocols can be built. Think about all productization in education, health, environment could be sitting on it, and you could get to these people whom money is trying to get to. I was telling Suresh earlier, there's a $250 billion market research industry sitting there to be disrupted. People out there running with scorecards and survey forms, trying to say, are you happy with what you got? Did the government deliver this to you? Or this company's good or product, do you like it? Imagine if digitization could, disintermediate all that. So I think from the vantage point where I'm sitting, looking at the social, impact infrastructure, just in India alone, it's a very large, at least a $14 billion opportunity. But the moment you bring the corporation into it and think about how they connect with customers and how they report their impact, that's another, couple of $1 trillion. So I think time has come, because now we have this public infrastructure sitting out there, to start thinking, how can we disrupt the traditional ways of trying to do good and try and write, on the back of this global impact movement. I want to end with a short story, especially for people who want to be out in the workforce soon. In '91, when I joined the workforce, the tech movement was very young. We just had, we had begun to get into India, the 20-kilogram cathode ray tube computers. I lost my eyesight to it, so I won't forget them. And we were very happy celebrating typewriter is extinct, calculator is extinct. There were fans required to cool down. They made sound like a truck. It was sitting next to you because the CPU to be cooled down required a fan. Now the newborns, the young startups of that time, the Microsofts, the Apples, the Intels, the Ciscos, the Tencents, they rule the global Fortune 500 list today. They were startups of the tech movement. So this new impact movement, this is going to be much larger than the tech movement. And the people who ruled the Fortune 500 list in 1991, the General Electric, General Motors, Ford, ExxonMobil, Shell, they're way down in the list. In the next 20 years, 30 years, this list that you see today is going to change. And it's going to change, and the people who will rule will be people who can figure out and report their impact, and who might be able to use the kind of infrastructure Suresh is building effectively. So that's the opportunity we are here to discuss. And Suresh, that's a little bit of background on how this impact thesis needs to come into larger economic discussions, corporate discussions, and social work.
Thank you, Amit. That was really very inspiring to hear. And looking at the impact, while Amit talked about $14 billion, if we put all public spending together in FY23 in India, our total public spending was to the tune of $280 billion. And what we are talking about is the CSR and private philanthropy, which is a mere $14-15 billion. So you're talking really, really big money over here. I think what is equally important, and I'll turn to you, that what policy and regulatory framework do you feel is essential to foster innovation in this space? When you're looking at DPIs to ensure it's ethical, it's secure, responsible, what do you think is really required to build this ecosystem as such?
Thank you, Suresh, for having me here. See, it is a typical case. You look at how e-commerce operated in a typical platform-based model. How many of you have heard of UPI? Everyone. So can someone tell me what is UPI at the most fundamental level? What is a UPI? What does it do? Okay, so I will try to explain this. Now, supposing there are 500 banks in a country, and they had to exchange money from bank 1 to, let's say, NF Bank. Unless each of their IT systems are connected to each other, they would not be able to exchange funds. Is that right? Does this make sense? Right? Now what UPI does is, it creates a simple, which we call as protocol, simple protocol for information exchange of funds. Right? So UPI is nothing but a standard of information exchange relating to financial movement of money from account A to account B. Is that clear? Now, if bank A is adopting and integrating its IT system to UPI, it becomes compatible with the UPI system. So, all the 500 banks on their own only adopt one common standard and they can interoperate finances. Is that clear? Now, this is how UPI works. Now, I would just extend this to what we've done in ONDC. Now, in a typical platform-based e-commerce model that we are all aware of, so what happens is, you have a platform, you have buyers on one side, you have sellers on one side, and the platform itself, they moderate the interaction between the buyers and the sellers. Would that be right? Right? So the platform will provide all services to the buyers. The sellers will provide, and the platform will provide all services to the sellers. But the interaction between the two is totally controlled by the platform. So the platform doesn't work in the interest of the buyers, nor it works in the interest of the sellers. वो अपने interest में काम करता है और वो actually बंदरबाट करता है. Right? Now the attempt of ONDC fundamentally is based on DPIs, so digital public infrastructure, जो हमारा इंडिया का अपना innovation है. What is that? So you create protocols for e-commerce. E-commerce में क्या क्या होता है? For example, you need to have a catalog, you need to search for a product, then you create a cart, then you make payment, and then you get a delivery at your place. Now these are 4 or 5 different things. So what ONDC does is, it is a protocol created by techies like you, Beacon protocol, which is powering the whole ONDC stuff. And being from India, our ambition is that we will fundamentally reorganize global e-commerce. Now that is the power of innovation, and that is the power that rests with you guys here. You are sitting in one of the best technological institutions. You have come out of a huge selection process. You've been given best of the trainings, and you are best placed to look at some of these fundamental issues. Now coming into, drawing a parallel from e-commerce to what Suresh ji has taken upon himself is about looking at the corporate social responsibility. Now, he is talking about sustainability in a very, very broad terms. And if I were to specify what are these broad terms, if you look at the Companies Act, Schedule 7, it says what are all the CSR activities that Government of India permits for an organization to spend money on. There are 13 activities listed. All of them are actually covered in your initiative. Is my understanding correct? Yes. So let me make it more specific. Go to Companies Act, Schedule 7, look at there are 13 activities which include everything that they have classified as social impact. It relates to education, hunger, poverty. It relates to grants to IITs, relates to grants to incubators, everything. So now what they are trying to do is it possible, like look at the ONDC model. On one side you have the buyers, on one side you have the sellers. Similarly in CSR, on one side you have the companies who are flush with funds. As per law, they are supposed to spend an amount of their profits on the corporate social responsibility. On the other side, there is a huge need in all those 13 sectors where that need needs to be satisfied. Is it possible to create a platform based on a digital public interface to do this? And this, I think, I must compliment you for this particular thought. It is absolutely amazing, and it's very, very ambitious. I'm sure, but the way the techies in this country have been able to find solutions to problems, they would definitely be coming up with solutions.
Thank you, Arel. No, absolutely. I think it's a very important area, and as Anuj even linked it back to saying the grants coming to an institution like yours. Right, IIT for us is a known institution, it's credentialed, you know where the money is going and how it is getting used. But in a lot of places, the challenge becomes even the legitimacy of the beneficiary. So I'll turn to Vivek, and Vivek, the question to you would be that, from the vantage point you are sitting and what you are doing in the technology space, how can we leverage DPIs to enhance trust and transparency in these sustainability initiatives? And how can you leverage AI, which is what we all talk about nowadays, to make some of this come true? Because you're really talking to right from a small MSME to an individual being connected to somebody right at the other end of the spectrum. So over to you.
Yes. First of all, thank you so much for including me in this discussion. And especially happy to be here because I am a graduate of IIT Delhi from a very long time ago. And I've also had the kind of privilege of being in the kind of the early part of the story of DPIs. Right, so therefore I'm part of the core technology team of Aadhaar, as well as been advisor to UPI, and also the number of discussions I've had to promote in the creation of backend protocol. By the way, you guys are all techies. You should go and study the backend protocol. Very interesting protocol to actually figure out how these kinds of disaggregated systems can be built. And so therefore, that's if you haven't gone there, please go and play with it and try it out. And that's something that's great. But so therefore, about 4 or 5 years ago, I got involved in actually saying that we said that the choice of participating in the digital economy should not be governed by the fact that you can speak English or you are computer savvy, and speaking your own language. These two should not be two different things. So therefore, we actually created an open source effort, and I was the initial advisor to a project known as Hashini, which talked about how to actually provide access or build open source AI tools in Indian languages to actually make to actually it's a fundamental inclusion thing, right? We know that the number of people who can speak English in India is fairly small, but we need to basically, and there are languages, thousands dialects, and if you want to talk about something that's sustainability and you want to talk about all the people in the country, then you need to be looking at both Indian languages and voice, which is fundamentally the modality through which people communicate in our country. So I think those two things are very important. So after actually working as in digital in DPI for many years, last year we basically 2 years ago everybody knows ChatGPT happened, and we saw that generative AI. We saw generative AI. AI is really a way to as a way that actually makes expertise free or at no cost. And that's something which is very amazing, because whether you look at education or you look at healthcare, right? Today, before the advent of generative AI, it was a challenge to understand that how every person can actually have access to a good education or actually have access to good healthcare. We're still not close to that happening, but at least we see the light at the end of the tunnel. And when you are looking at how AI would be used in India to actually make the lives of people better, merging it with DPI, which is actually a unique technological innovation from India, right? Which has come, which basically allows you to look at it in a different way. I think there is the Western way, which is very capitalistic in its thinking, and then there is the Chinese way, which is the other way. But I think in India we've actually come up with the concept of many of these core things being public infrastructure, which means that they run like roads or electricity. They are actually running like public utilities, The at certain layer, the concept is that some things are actually priced at a, it is at a cost plus kind of a margin, and you innovate on top of that so that you create a kind of a field where many players can come and innovative solutions can come. So I'm really very excited in the marriage of DPI and AI coming together to actually create uniquely Indian solutions which will make life better. I mean, if you look at UPI, the very first time in India, I think, we say कि हमारे देश में something is happening better than anywhere else in the world, right? But that's great. But I think the way I see it is, there are so many other things that are still so much harder in India than in other parts of the world. And I think that when you combine AI really with UPI, the opportunity of making people's lives easier in a million different ways is possible. And that's the mission that that we are on, and I think that's a very exciting thing. That how do we make sure that everybody has access to the basic services in an easy way? And I think now for the first time, both the cost structure as well as the definitions are possible to make it happen.
Thank you, Vivek. Thanks a lot. I think what Vivek was also saying, AI for DPI, as we call it. So how can it become as easy as talking to machines and being able to getting your work done? But I would like to just step back a bit. India this year, or rather last year, when we had the G20 presidency, there was a very strong thrust to showcase India's digital public infrastructure to the rest of the world. India actually took a lead to say we will provide the DPI knowledge to the global south. And what is about DPI that India is so good at? Because when we talk about UPI, the foundational layer was actually Aadhaar. When we talk about inclusion at the grassroots level, India was able to traverse a journey of financial inclusion in 7 years, what would have otherwise taken 5 decades. That's a global study which talks about the speed at which we were able to accelerate the journey of inclusion, primarily because we put out a digital public infrastructure out there. The 3 foundational DPIs as we see it is going to be identity, payments we spoke about, UPI, and then about data. So effectively, if I look at it from an individual's perspective, I start with who I am, right? What do? I pay, I transact, right? And what I have data, my financial data, my various points of data which I use to secure services. Now let's come similarly into the philanthropy or the sustainability ecosystem. You're talking a host of different actors, but the question is, can you put a protocol out there to link all of them? You will have corporates, you will have philanthropic institutions, which today have funds with them. But they are looking for people, for beneficiaries, where they can provide this, those funds to help them out. So it is making sure that the entities providing support are able to connect with the entities requiring support. Today, NGOs, which Amit called out, are today implementing agencies, which actually become the means of taking the money and investing into projects. And when you're looking at the end beneficiaries, which could be individuals, which could be small enterprises, they are the entities which are getting the funds. Now, if we are able to create a digital ecosystem which connects all of them, that is what is all about DPI. If I take, and I'm going to read it out from here, India actually came out with a definition of DPI in the G20 report, and they talked about the fact that it's a set of shared digital systems that should be secure and interoperable. Interoperability is at the core of a DPI. You are able to work across different applications which are running on a DPI and can be built on open standards and specifications to deliver and provide equitable access to public. So a lot of SDG parameters come into the construct of a DPI. And I think that is what really we are talking about. And as Anilji rightly said, today the government, a central agency, plays the role in laying out the digital rails. We've seen that happen in UPI. NPCI came in as an entity, set out all the rails. But who was building the consumer applications, the applications with which you were actually able to consume those services? It was not just the banks, it was big tech. Today, some of the applications which all of us use to do a UPI transaction is not really a banking application, but maybe an application driven by a Google or a PhonePe, which actually comes into play. So when we look at DPI as being laid out in the sustainability space, we are really looking at all of you coming in and building the consumer tech or the corporate tech to be able to consume services and exchange information. So it becomes a wide ecosystem where infrastructure is laid by the government, because that is where you want to create equitable, interoperable access, and on top of it, you build multiple equations to be able to lead into it and provide services. Anilji, any comments? And
No, so I think you've summarized the whole thing very well. And to have the discussion in this forum at IIT Delhi is fundamentally to arise some interest in the young innovators to look at DPIs, how you can create protocols for various purposes. Now, we've done it for commerce, we've done it for mobility, it's been done for identity and so on. But now we're trying to do, as Sureshji is taking the lead, for doing it for corporate social responsibility purposes. Now this is something that's absolutely out of this box. It's absolutely something that you need to think about. And this is only to exhort all of you to look at this and see how these problems can be solved.
Thank you, Anilji. And because I come from the impact side, I have to say the other big upside for DPI is that it can marry idealism. Idealism no longer may be at a discount. We all know none of us want to see poverty, none of us like seeing inequity. We don't want to see people being treated unfairly. And there are 3 billion such people in the poor in the world, 300 million in India. And reaching them has been very hard. And that has been a pain point for everyone. A company like Proteon eGov, which delivers the most Aadhaar cards in India, most PAN cards, they can possibly have the database of this 140 crore Indians at one place. A rare thing which can be made available for businesses, non-profits to deliver goods. Now imagine, tech doesn't solve everything, and I know because Anilji has repeatedly reminded us that this is a place where a lot of tech ideas are born. I know all of you know who created the World Wide Web, right? Everyone in this room? Okay, Tim Berners-Lee did that. Now, what you will not read in press is his second internet failed. And I'm coming to why that's important for DPI. 10 years ago, almost 10 years ago, Tim Berners-Lee said, well, this internet is very expensive. It requires all this wired network, to move on. What if it did not require all that? So he created an experiment which Twitter funded. It ran in 8 or 9 countries, including in Western Uttar Pradesh in India, where the transfer of data was phone to phone using Bluetooth, no Wi-Fi was required, nothing. It was only video, it was meant for people who cannot speak, absolute poor, who might record something and and as one woman crosses another woman on the street, the data transfer happens. Very big experiment, but it failed. So not all tech solutions reach the absolute poor. But Suresh and Proteon eGov have done what Tim Berners-Lee experiment could not. Through Aadhaar and through the PAN IDs, they are reaching the absolute last mile. It's very important because poor make good customers. Not just because we want to make sure there's no poverty. Those of you who don't know this, microfinance in 2010, the Andhra Pradesh debacle, had just 2% write-off. 2% write-offs in microfinance where we give unsecured loan, poor 50,000 rupees, etc., without any collateral. Our banks had 7 to 8% default rate. When we lend to our millionaires and billionaires, 7 to 8%. Poor make good customers, not to be exploited, but so that we can fulfill their aspirations and build the impact economy model. So that is where DPI comes in, because we can achieve things finally, which many people, including the founder of www, thought that we should be able to do, but weren't able to do. So I think the time is right. This is a great place to be talking about this, how to take social impact to the last mile and how to use this public infrastructure for good. I'll end with this and leave you with this. In the world you are all growing up, it will not be good enough just to make money. The wealth I mentioned, $150 trillion, all is dying to report some social or environmental good they are doing along with the money. Within a decade, it'll never be illegal, but it'll be immoral to say I make 20% or 15% return without saying, while educating so many girls, while making lives better in this place, while offsetting so much carbon, while restoring, clean rivers, and that is where it's very important to get the impact thesis into technology. So with that, I'll hand this back to you.
Thank you, Amit. Vivek, any comments? And then we'll just see if there are any questions from the audience.
Yeah, I think the interesting, and I want to just put 2 points. One is that we talked about how trust can come into systems, especially when you are a systems at a small scale. It's everybody, everybody who's there. So the trust is by basically what and other kinds of things. But when you want to build systems where you are scaling, you have to have other mechanisms of trust. So a couple of things which are coming, which are actually making ways that first is that we believe that especially with the smartphones and all of those things being there and people doing transactions in digital ways, they are now having this digital data exhaust that they have, and this data can actually be used to actually establish their trust or their trustworthiness to actually be part of this economy and to be able to actually lend to them, which is actually that is one of the things that has been a problem in India, that we are not able to actually lend. In fact, that is the hardest group of people to lend are actually the poor, while it is much easier for other people to actually get access to capital. And this, of course, the fact that this data, which actually talks that these people are responsible stewards of financial system, allows the ability, and that's what this is something we're still, obviously there is this account aggregator with more than 700 million accounts that, data that's there, but I think the point that we have to actually, we're still at the very beginning of this, but there is the potential of the ability of all people having access to capital, which I think is one of the fundamental ways by which people can move to the next step in their life. The second part, which I think is important, is the concept of registries. And it's a little bit of a technical concept that basically to understand that, of course, there are individuals. Like you look at Aadhaar is a registry of individuals in the country, that you can now understand who is who, or somebody can actually assert that I am so and so. But there are registries of various other different kinds of entities, and these registries are the goal in many of the different APIs is to actually create these registries of groups of, maybe it's doctors, or maybe it's providers of some kind, or maybe it can be NGOs. And I think that the concept of having registries with also trust scores and understanding how they behave, and all those things can actually help to scale this to a much larger way, where you may or may not have a personal touch with the entity that you are dealing with, but at the same time you need to be able to trust what work that they are doing. So I think that the concept of registries, and in most public DPIs, if you go down underneath, there is a registry there, and that concept can certainly be extended to the the sustainability sector. So that's all I have time for.
Okay, I think we are running out of time, so thank you very much.
Thank you for such an insightful session. Now I would like to invite Chinmay sir, coordinator of eDC, to present them with token of appreciation.
पानी दे